Hello, everyone. We are with Lessons with Rain number 4. We are continuing on with the Sicilian dragon. Okay, so yesterday we were doing that insane, well, not insane, but pretty cool little gambit in kind of like the middle of the opening, right? Where we sacrifice the pawn. And of course, we looked at, and to anyone who's looking at the video, you can look at the previous YouTube video, Lessons with Rain number 3, where we go into a variation where it's generally bad for white if they accept the pawn, but maybe if they play very, very precisely, that they could maybe become equal or slightly better, but that's kind of like the point of gambits. The point of gambits is that you are not the computer. The computer, of course, has, moves calculated all the way until the very end of the game or whatever you decide to put your stockfish on. So they, of course, don't have the correlation of, being worried in a gambit. So yeah, don't play. I feel like don't play a gambit against a computer, especially if you're using a computer for practice. Um, okay, so today we're going to be going over some of the variations that happen after. Of course, not everyone is going to want to push the pawn forward, so we are going to go into one of the other main lines, where there is actually going to be some opening traps. Like I mentioned, one of the reasons why I prefer the accelerated over the hyper accelerated, and you already know my view on terms of why I like the accelerated dragon over classical dragon. Even though classical dragon is still actually a very good opening, like to play. It's just everyone has their own preference. I like to have the possibility of playing d5 later on, but everyone has their own as a point of view. Okay, so e4, c5. Actually, why don't you play as black, and then once we get to the critical position, I'll take over.
Sure.
Okay, so this is where the critical this is where we kind of like left off. This is where in the previous video we were talking about when white trades off and then pushes the pawn
hmm
to e5. So what we're gonna look over today is so there are multiple different ways that can be played here. So there are two, I would say, kind of common responses is moving the bishop to c4 right away, or playing pawn to f3. Now, pawn to f3 is for the reason of kind of playing queen to d2. So the idea with like pawn to f3 is that you are stopping the knight from being able to go to g4. Because if you play queen to d2 right now, number one, your opponent actually won't be able to play bishop to h6 right away. However, you also have the possibility of playing, like knight to g4 and trying to chase off this bishop if they play queen to d2. That's usually what I tend to do in those positions. Okay, so let's start off with bishop c4 because it is a very common. It is quite commonly played. So in this position, there's technically two main lines after bishop to c4. Of course, things may have changed in the past 10 years, but from what I remember, there was the idea of playing queen a5 or castle. Queen to a5 is interesting. However, I find that if white simply castles, there isn't really exactly much to do. Like, I understand queen a5 is with the intention of pinning the knight and then kind of like threatening knight takes e4. However, if they castle, they already get out of that threat. So I when I was playing like this variation, I was doing queen to a5. However, I don't know, like the past um, I don't know, the past times I've been mostly castling in this kind of scenario. Now, I can explain though why queen a5 is a. So here's the thing, like even looking at the opening explorer right now with on Lichess, um, yes, there's a higher percentage rate for black with queen to a5, but I don't know if you notice with the little book, but there's a significantly different difference in games. So even though castle gives 48% win rate instead of 51, like queen a5,
Hmm.
but castle there's 110,000 games, while with queen a5 there's 22,000. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm not very good. I'm not very good at math. Just because you're a chess player, it doesn't mean like you're really, really good at mental math. Probably Wayne, you're better at um like percentage wise. I don't know, but probably somewhat the same in terms of games. Or I might be wrong, um, but yeah. So I think it definitely goes by preference, but we can take a look at both of them. I think queen a5 it definitely gives some chances in like maybe your opponent will make somewhat of a mistake. Like for example, here with queen to a5, I can already give you an example on a potential mistake. Just a second. I believe after queen a5, does knight takes e4 work in this position? Sorry, after queen to d2. So in this position, for example, here with queen a5, yes, there are some little opening traps, but if your opponent just castles, and in my opinion, that is very like Wayne. What would don't you think castling as white is very um obvious to do? Like, what would you do as white here if queen a5 got played?
I mean, I'd probably castle, yeah.
I think so too, especially like noticing that there is this threat. And if you don't know how to play this opening, you probably won't be considering something like pawn to f3, just because um, in a lot of cases, right? If you want to move your f pawn, you kind of want to advance it a little bit more, like in a lot of openings, um, I would say. And I don't know, like queen d2, I guess it makes sense if you want to castle in the other direction, but at the same time, as white, I don't know if I would want to castle on the queen side now, knowing that the queen is on a5, and you know, and then black can in the future play a6 and b5 and get involved into the game that way. So but I'll definitely show you what ends up happening here. So I'm going to leave this. I'm going to call this main line. Sorry, seven bishop and queen. Okay. So after queen a5 in this position, queen to d2. So after queen to d2, there's actually a really, really interesting tactic here. And the way that I would be looking at it is in this position, this knight on d4, how many defenders are there on this knight?
There are two, but the queen is overloaded.
Yeah, the
Um,
exactly. And the thing is that if we end up opening up this bishop, then we will have another attacker on the knight. So in this position, we need to find a tactic that gets rid of the queen and opens up the, like, gets rid of the queen in a few moves or the next move. And then we actually win the knight on d4 because we've removed the defender. Well, we're not winning the knight, it's just we're doing a tactic that gives us material. Try to get this knight.
Okay. Let's see. So maybe knight g4 is still a good move here. Takes. Actually, that's kind of interesting. If well, I don't know what the response would be for knight to g4. Probably
Knight takes c6. But if they move
yeah.
away, then for sure. They'd probably capture on c6 and then play. No, actually, that's still. Even if they play bishop
Oh,
d4, then you can play e5 or something.
what about knight takes d4?
Yeah.
No. Oh yeah, knight takes d4.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Knight takes. Sorry. I thought you said knight takes e4. Oops.
Oh,
That was my
well,
fault.
knight takes e4. Oh, that's also knight takes e4. Knight takes e4. Queen takes. Bishop takes, and then bishop takes knight.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sorry. I screwed that up. I for some reason heard e4. I got really excited. Knight to g4, by the way, works. This is definitely a move to consider in many different other variations, but because we do have like a really good move, knight takes e4. And by the way, this knight takes e4 is a very common. You'll notice like a resemblance in the other variations because yeah, like anyways, we'll go over the other variations because there's multiple of these knight takes e4, but I will play it out. So if queen goes to d2
Mm-hmm.
here, knight takes e4. In this position, so if knight takes, now we will go over all of the different options, of course, but we'll just go over the
Sure.
one that you were looking over. So knight takes e4, queen takes here, king takes, and then yeah, I would probably capture with the knight just so that my bishop
Right.
just stays alive for the
On that
remainder of the
diagonal,
game.
yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
we now have an extra pawn, and yeah, like I mean, in the future we could even consider playing something like okay, maybe not right away because then there's a knight check. However, I don't know. I always like look at pawn forks because people underestimate pawns, and I used to be one of those people, that would underestimate pawns, and then I would like
Mm-hmm.
miss pawn forks, just because in the beginning, right? You're thinking, oh, a pawn is only worth 1 point. It's not really something that you have to always be. Um, but everyone goes through that. I mean, I'm sure even players like Fabiano Caruana, when they were young, probably underestimated pawns, at least in the first 6 months of their chess career. Um, okay,
If
yes.
oh, so they're not, so they won't take back with the bishop because I think they lose another pawn after that. Is that
Yeah,
true?
actually, well, it's
No, they won't
close.
necessarily lose a. No, they won't lose a pawn. Yeah, because that
It's
knight.
close. No, but you're right. Like for example, if they don't play pawn to c3, then yes, we actually have an option of essentially playing f5 and then removing the defender of this pawn. But yes, if your opponent captures and plays pawn to c3, but to be honest, I would always be happy in this position
Sure.
for this because guess what? We also have a bishop pair. I know that you know that I like knights more than bishops, but you kind of can't say no to a bishop pair when you're given the
Sure.
chance. Um, so I'm a little bit, I guess, biased. Yeah, so queen to a5. I mean, I'm just trying to think of other variations that could possibly. I'm just like looking. Yeah, sorry, that was the that's the best move is to castle. Yes, there is bishop b3. Okay, bishop b3 that just loses a pawn, so that's just a move that I don't really think that we should consider. This bishop b3 move because the whole entire idea is to oh right sorry let me go back to the other variation because there's one thing that we need to go over is what happens
Hmm.
in this position if knight takes e4 knight takes c6 because in chess you need to be looking at every single possible move that your opponent can well I mean I guess realistic that your opponent but so knight
Mm.
takes c6 so there is a problem because if you capture the knight right now, you've actually just lost your piece for no reason, right? So if you capture
Yeah.
here, then they just capture on e4, and now we just have two bishops while they have two bishops and a knight. So that's not great. Um, uh, Another thing we need to be careful about, right, is that our queen is in danger. So we have to figure something out.
Um.
There's a very interesting.
Yes. Bishop takes c3,
There's
maybe.
a so the problem with bishop takes c3 is knight takes wait, knight takes a5. 1 second. Bishop takes c3. Knight takes and I believe we're are we down a piece? Let's calculate. I believe we're down a piece because
We are. Yeah, you're right.
it's knight
Oh wait, no, we're are we? No, we are. We are. Oh, no, we are for sure. Yeah,
protects
yeah.
protects through. No, but you're very, very close. Just keep in mind that this queen is still in danger. So you can put your own queen danger as well, but you kind of don't want to keep your queen. It's yeah. Anyways, it's an interesting move.
Hmm. Um. Sorry, I'm still looking for it. Um.
Sorry, I just had a little bit
It's okay.
just as a snack.
Um.
You're on the right track. It's very similar to bishop takes c.
Uh. Oh, actually. Oh. Hmm. Take. Take. Down a piece. Hmm. Um. I mean, I guess we could do queen takes, maybe.
Yeah, it's queen
Uh.
take.
Queen takes.
It's definitely very, very weird, but the idea is that the really the only difference is that your queen is not going to be in danger and you are taking the knight with your you're basically you're just moving away your queen from this obstacle because the only reason why all the other variations don't work is because the knight can capture on a5, and in the future the bishop would be able to protect it. If there wasn't that possibility, then of course things would be different. But in this position, queen takes c3 definitely looks like it looks definitely off, but yeah, uh, queen captures. Now in this position, you do have two options, but which option do you think is preferred in this?
I mean, I'd probably take with the knight.
Yeah,
Um,
and why knight instead of bishop?
because you're going to lose the bishop immediately if you do that, and the bishop is a stronger piece in this case.
Right, and here's the thing. There's actually a little bit more to it, but when the knight captures the queen, our knight is poisoned. And why is the knight poisoned?
Because after the pawn takes, then you take back with check, and then you can take the knight on c6.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Yeah, you can take
or actually, or the sorry,
you
or
can
the rook.
or the rook,
Actually,
exactly. So we would win exchange basically
yeah.
because we would capture the rook and the knight's still in danger. That's kind of like the main point. You generally wouldn't want to give up two pieces for the rook, but the case is different here because the knight is still in danger. So if your opponent recaptures your bishop, you get the knight. So yeah, in this position, knight takes c3, and now we are up a pawn. So probably the best move would be, well, actually, technically speaking, in this position, um, white can white can try and get this pawn back, which is actually the best
Mm.
move in this position. However, where do you think this knight should go to potentially try to win a different pawn? So
Uh, about a4.
yeah, a4, very good. I'm glad. Yeah, because if you do any other like discovered attack, it's there's just not enough attackers. But by playing knight to a4, you've added two attackers, which means even if the rook moves to b1, you would still be able to capture. Um, Now, okay, so knight goes to a4. Let's say I don't know, like okay, rook b1. Yeah, knight takes b2. Now, my first initial response was actually, oh my god, this knight is trapped. But actually, this bishop is forced to defend this knight. So you can't play bishop to c1 right now. And eventually, we are going to get rid of this bishop. So really interesting. So you kind of do castle,
Mm-hmm.
castle, d6. Even if like knight goes to b5.
Why not d5?
Oh, d5 would just the bishop's covering that one for now.
Okay.
Pawn to d6. Yeah, pawn to d6, and then there's ideas of playing bishop to e6, and then unraveling the yeah, it's -2 right now in this position. Um, yeah, so
So hold
interesting.
on.
Yeah,
After taking with the queen.
yeah,
Okay, this is not
sorry.
the. So go back again. Keep, keep coming. After taking with the queen. Yeah, that was my question.
Okay. Yep. So then, I mean, in this
I guess
position,
it's
probably just knight takes d2. Knight takes d2, and now the bishop's under
oh
attack
yeah, that
and
makes
his
sense.
knight's under attack.
Yeah. Yep.
Does he have to?
Take with the
Capture
bishop.
back.
Could take with
Uh,
the bishop
that
instead of
is true.
the king. And then
Some people they might want to already get their king activated, so it really depends on like I mean the game that we played yesterday, man, that yeah, leaving the king in the center of the board with um with still two rooks and a bunch of minor pieces on the board, you saw how in trouble he got.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah, in that
but I
game. That
think I
was
think we forced him. Well, yeah, but I think we forced him to move. Right? He couldn't castle, if I remember correctly. So
oh yeah,
there wasn't anything he could do about that.
that's right. Here at least he has the possibility of choosing between the two. So it really is
Yeah.
by preference and stuff. I so from my understanding, here's the thing. The reason why I would be thinking in this position capturing with the king is because if I capture with the bishop, then my bishop might feel really tied down to the pawn. While
Yeah.
I think
It's
that the
true.
king is better to protect the pawn, at least on c3, because then white's bishop on e3 can still play in the game, and maybe even black, sorry, white can consider to play bishop d4, even though that's kind of doesn't really work with e5. But I know. I mean, these are just some things to consider.
This is still even though, right? Unless I've
No, it's
miscounted.
it's it's
Like
one extra
oh, not
pawn.
even. We're up a pawn. Right, we're up a
We're
pawn.
we're still up a pawn,
Sorry.
which is nice. Yeah, so I'm sorry. Like I know that I may have made a mistake earlier. That's why I said like when I was kind of trying to get you to find knight takes e4. I was just
Hmm.
talk. I accidentally said winning a piece, but I didn't mean that. I just meant we're actually just winning a pawn. I meant we're winning material. Like,
Sure.
but we're winning back the knight. Is what was kind of like my point in that
Hmm.
regard. So in a lot of these games, um, it would be interesting. I remember in one of my very last tournament, in one of the very last rounds of the uh, Reykjavik Open, um, he fell for like a trap like this. And it was kind of, I felt really bad for him. Well, I wasn't really doing well in the tournament. It was like the very, very last round. We were both like not doing well in the tournament. And you know what he said like after the game? He was like, it was the very last game and I was really unhappy. And I decided to play a white opening I've like never studied before. And he fell into the trap. So but I mean, you know, I like I like his attitude though. You know, it's kind of like why not try a new opening? You're not doing really well. You're not fighting for any type of material, and if you were planning to switch openings anyways, you could. Obviously, that may have not been the best motivational uh moment for him.
Hmm.
Like the
Sure.
however, I remember when I first learned the King's Indian attack. Like I didn't learn much, but like when I was learning a little bit about it, yeah, the my first tournament that I played it, I didn't do well, which is why it is recommended to try to practice your openings online. And my dad actually encourages 3+2 games because when you're practicing the opening, your main priority is to understand what to play in the first 20 moves of the game. And the reason why I'm saying 20 moves is because, as you see, a lot of like the opening theory even goes kind of towards 15 moves. But the reason why I'm saying 20 moves is that you kind of like follow a plan after that, right? Like the 5 moves after that, you're kind of like somewhat going on with the dragon plan,
Hmm.
etc. So playing a lot of games, but then not really caring about the result. I mean, in terms of if you get into time pressure and you lose by time, who cares? Because the point of playing those really fast games is that you're trying to make sure that the first 20 moves of the game you're doing correctly, and then whatever happens after, it should be skill wise, right? Like
Sure.
who's better at maybe attacking, who's better at tactics, who's better at endgame, etc. So yeah, so queen d2, yeah, as I mentioned, bishop b3, like why would we even consider like a move like that after knight takes e4? There's really no other move that I can see. Like, I don't know, Wayne, do you see another move that could stop knight takes e4? Because queen d2 actually seems like it stops at knight takes e4, but a person who doesn't know this opening trap would fall for it, of course. But is there any other way that we could
I mean, aside from like f3 or castling.
Yeah,
Well, castling doesn't do it, but f3.
yeah, F3. We
Um,
could we could take a look at F3. I'm pretty sure with F3 it has a very similar. By the way, it has a very similar idea with knight takes e4, but you're not supposed to like. Let me think about it because I believe you're not supposed to do it now, um, because you don't have enough attackers. So a very common move, like in this opening with Queen A5. I mean, that's why I'm saying like it is my preference. It's up to you whether or not in this opening you want to play Queen A5 or Castle. Queen A5 definitely gives more chances in terms of like traps, but if
mhm.
your opponent castles, I don't know, maybe your queen is still quite active there. It's just that I've noticed that sometimes my opponent like figures out a way to like to get rid of that queen. But anyways, it's as I
I
said,
mean,
it's not a bad idea.
Queen a5 is kind of nice because you have that nice open rank, right? That you and if he does decide to castle, you can just I mean, you can just shift over. You can go down to
Oh,
h5
maybe
and attack on the other
absolutely.
side.
That's a good point.
I mean, that's
Um,
it's strategically it seems pretty good.
mhm.
Um,
Well, I
but
mean,
also, yeah,
it's
but also,
common.
as you know, I like to castle as late as possible. So
Yeah, that is yeah. I understand. No, that's why I'm saying like with Queen 2, I don't remember I honestly I don't remember exactly why I started playing Castle. Maybe it's just because I didn't want to memorize every single variation what not here. So in this
sure.
position there's Queen B4. So Queen B4, the idea is that you are attacking the bishop and you are now putting pressure onto the knight. So when the bishop goes to b3, which is a commonly played move, bishop to b3. I mean, now
Hmm.
I see that the best move is actually to play knight to b5. Best move is to play knight to b5 and threaten this.
Yikes.
It's
Yep.
actually not that scary because I would probably take the chance and capture on c4. Why? Because the knight is going to be trapped on a8. So then you have a very high chance of getting two pieces for the rook. Like a significantly high chance of getting two pieces for the rook. So I guess it depends on preference, but yeah, but a lot of people that I know, they would end up playing like bishop to b3 because they think that they've defended everything, but in reality, the same exact uh, move happens here. Knight
Hmm.
takes e4. It's just with a little bit of a different, kind of looks a little bit different with the queen being on b4. So after knight takes, yeah, knight takes e4. Of course, if okay, so there is one thing. Oh right, there's the pin. Later on we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, yeah, there's a pin. No, because I'm mixing up variations. There's a variation with similar with knight takes e4 with queen b6, and there's something that I definitely will need to um, tell you about it later. Okay, it's just I
Okay.
mixed up the variations. As I said, a lot of the variations are very similar to each other, which is kind of nice. With like knight takes e4 can happen in many different scenario, like in a few different scenarios. Um, yes, but okay, knight takes e4. So there's really only two options. I mean, I see is to capture on c6 or capture the knight. Of course, if the knight gets captured, um, I I'm a little bit curious why. Oh, maybe it's because of a3. The difference. I mean, bishop takes d4. It makes sense in terms of trying to trade pieces when you are up
Um,
material.
because I think because knight takes threatens the bishop on b3.
No, no, no. Well, the preferred is actually
No,
bishop takes.
no. I mean, bishop takes, and then knight threatens the bishop on
Oh,
b3,
okay.
and there's no way to. I mean, and if the queen
So it's a
takes
more
and your upper
okay.
queen, yeah.
That's a good point.
So
So double trade. So basically trading. So basically, black can trade a bunch of people um, in a pretty short period of time. Yeah,
yeah,
that's interesting.
maybe. I don't know. It's. I'm not really convinced of my answer,
No,
hundred
no, no. I
percent.
no, no, no. I'm no. I just I am very curious in this position. Okay, so one of the reasons why, by the way, that I brought up that you need to be very careful about sometimes capturing on here is that if they have like this pawn c3 move, like in the other variations, it'll be very specific. Like there is like you have to be very specific with how you capture because when the
Hmm.
fork happens, you have a way to get out of it. But if you choose the wrong piece, you actually can't get out of it. That's why I started mixing up the variations in my brain. Um,
Hmm.
but in this position, it does not make sense to me why. And by the way, like I'm seeing the computer, and the computer there's a humongous difference between the two, and that's why I find it really interesting. Why there's a huge difference. Bishop takes d4
Wow.
is negative 1.7. Knight takes d4
Uh,
is slightly better for white, slightly, very slightly, but still going from being almost 2 points ahead to being basically equal. Uh, something is wrong. Something is very, very wrong. If that, because especially when you're up a pawn, right? If you're up a pawn and the computer does not like your position being up a pawn, ooh. So I have a
yeah,
feeling that
that's
it must be eighth. No. Uh, okay, so it says here castle. Okay.
uh-huh.
Okay, I'm still not following how this is castle. Takes b3.
Pawn takes
5.
b3. Uh, I mean, it's this is saying a
A
takes
takes b3.
b3,
Okay.
bishop takes c3.
Oh. Oh, I see that now. Okay. 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 I see that now. Okay, let me explain. It's basically
Sure.
so interesting. Basically, if you castle here, I saw there's like knight to d5 opportunity in this position. And then trying to trap the rook. 1 second here. So if castle, yeah. So bishop takes c3 has to be played, like and then you move your queen away, but you've given up your dark squared bishop. That's the problem.
Actually, it
Um,
says queen takes e4. Like you can
it says
take on
queen.
e4 then.
If knight d5, yes, queen takes e4, but in the future. So in this position, if
No,
castle,
no, no. I mean, no, I
oh,
mean if
here right now, bishop.
bishop takes c3, pawn takes e3, queen takes e4. Or yeah,
Yep. But from my understanding, that the reason why it's slightly better for white here is because we've given up the dark squared bishop, and
yep.
now I don't know. Now it's a little bit scary where to think about kind of castling. If we have enough time to like maybe castle and play pawn f6 and then play king g7 and then kind of gather queen on h4, then it'll be fine. Um, but you still have to be careful.
Yeah, we're up. Are we up? We're up 2 pawns now,
Yeah, but
and the
I even
and the
me, I
computer
don't feel
still likes
comfortable.
white better.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. I don't even feel comfortable
yeah.
in this position as black. I feel like I would feel more comfortable if I've already castled and I already had like my pawn on f6 or something. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. Also, this pawn is hanging, so well, not hang. Not really at the moment, I guess, because the bishop's in trouble. But in this position, I also kind of like even like the move like rook to e1, even though that's not the number one choice that they have. I kind of like rook e1 to keep on the same line, and then play bishop c5 or something and try to win the pawn on e7. I definitely can see how in this position, white has compensation. It's because white has already castled. They are one move away from linking rooks. One move away. But
Yeah.
we are a
They have
decent
a bunch
amount.
of they have a bunch of semi-open files, and we do not. Like the C files closed off. All of their pieces that can move along files are like open. Our queen is kind of hanging out in the middle of nowhere with no support. It's and our pawn structure is. I mean, it's okay, but it's not. I don't know. I see what you
Yeah,
mean.
our pawn structure is good, but the problem is that we can't take advantage of it really quickly because we have to
Yeah,
focus on getting our king into safety and other things. But I mean, I
yeah.
can see how black could still win this game because still, of course, white has to. Of course, white still has to play the most accurate moves. However, like, why even get into this scenario when all we have to remember is in this position
Is
is
to
to
take
capture
with the
with the
bishop.
bishop. Exactly.
Yeah,
That just changes um like everything.
so much. It's
And now like everything the computer basically shows is one negative 1.8 or higher black.
yeah,
Um
yep.
yeah, I hate when like a move like that you think that there's really no difference. Um but um
But there is a difference down the line that you have to
exactly.
think hard to see. Yeah,
Well, that's why people like learn openings because these things are hard to see on your own, and because many people have already studied the opening, like many different times, or like just many different years has gone through. Actually, I wonder when was the Sicilian dragon like introduced?
oh, I don't know.
I'm just
I mean, I'm gonna guess what
oh
1750.
ah, close in the 1800s.
Oh,
I
well, I
actually thought
mean
it
that
was.
is. Oh, in not in the 18th century, in the 1800s. I'm like a century off. It's pretty bad. It's not that close.
No, well, I mean, it's close compared to chess in general, because by the way, there's a lot of openings that have been around, like, or like
Hmm.
the dragon was, at least it says here, the origin was by what, Louis Paulson,
Oh
1880,
yeah.
named after the constellation Draco. I didn't even know that there was a constellation named Draco.
Uh, mhm.
Um, it
Not
Draco
not
is a
not a not an astronomer.
constellation, the far northern sky. Its name is Latin for dragon. Oh, it was one of the 48 constellations listed by the second century astronomer Ptolemy. I've never heard of it. It means one of the 88.
Ptolemy, yeah.
Well, to be honest, I learned too. Um, but it's nice that you've heard of this.
I mean, I've heard the name. I don't remember what context, but
Mhm.
Ptolemy was a. Can't even remember if he was Greek or not. I think he was Greek. But yeah, it's a long time ago.
Yeah,
As when I was, I mean, that was a long time ago, yes, but it's been a long time since I've actually like looked into uh that side of history. So
it's so interesting. So the reason why it's called the Sicilian dragon because the Sicilian is what we call playing c5, right? Because there
mhm.
is the Sicilian knight or if the Sicilian, the classic Sicilian or something like that, and then there's a
Mhm.
bunch of different Sicilians. So um, I learned something new today. I did not realize that it was named after a constellation. Well, now we know. I like the opening even more now that I know that information. Well, I just mean,
That's good.
you know how like there's some openings, nothing against it, but like there's so many openings that are just named after the person, which is there's nothing wrong with it. It just has a different create like this gives a different creativity, right, to the name. Um,
Yeah, it's Sicilian, which isn't named after any particular person, as far as I know, and then Dragon, which isn't named after any particular person. That's yeah.
right, because I think isn't Sicilian like based off of like Sicily, like or
I mean, I would
something.
imagine,
I would
I would
imagine.
imagine that's the case.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So bishop takes d4. Um, I mean, what is he? I mean, he could play a3. Um,
Isn't that
play
just
a3. I don't know.
yes?
Bishop takes. I don't know. Like what else? Well, I mean, if bishop takes, the in my opinion, the game just becomes uh pretty good. So let's say if bishop takes, queen takes. Um, Now, of course, doesn't have to trade. However, let us talk about in this position what makes a huge difference on why I am not worried about the queens not being traded off. Yes, there's queen f3 and stuff, but as you can see, there's no dark squared bishop for white, which means that
Oh, that's true.
they can't go in and terrorize us. Which means that
Yeah,
we
that makes the
actually
king very safe. Yeah.
exactly. And that means that moving the king up to g7 and then creating that fortress with f6 won't be such a bad idea. And you know why? Because your opponent can't like gang up and put, like a queen and bishop battery and try to get the queen here. That's one of the problems like in the previous scenario why trying to get like pawn f6 and even getting your king to g7 wouldn't work because if the queen and bishop ganged up, they would be able to get into this square, right? Now, of
Mhm.
course, yes, it is possible that maybe one of the other white pieces can help the white queen get into h6. Um, However, that will take just, in my opinion, significantly more effort and potentially even longer to achieve that goal. So, um, yeah. So queen takes. Yeah. So queen takes d4. Queen takes d4. If queen f3, I would probably just castle, and then there are still some things that you have to be careful about, which is of course this pawn on f7. But to be honest, at this point, it's really kind of like you have to play this part of the game yourself. You're up a pawn. There's no dark squared bishop. Develop your pieces, and
Mhm.
so queen f3. If capture, there's only one thing I guess I would be somewhat worried about is that there might be knight to d5, and and what's the problem with castling in this position? Like it looks like you're moving away from the threat.
Let's see. If you castle in this position, um, sorry, I'm still thinking. I mean, you can. I mean, knight e7 still forks the rook and the bishop, doesn't it? Or no, it doesn't. Forks the king and the bishop, but that's not that much of an issue. Um, the knight to c7 doesn't really trap the rook.
Yeah,
I mean,
castling.
I guess if hmm, I don't see it. I don't want to.
What was the king protecting?
Well, the king was protecting. Well, the king was protecting D3 and sorry, D2 and sorry, D7 and E7, and F7.
Hmm?
Um, it'll still be protecting F7. Um, E7 won't be protected. I guess you just lose a pawn.
Yeah,
Oh, I guess you just lose a pawn. Oh, sorry.
yeah,
Okay,
you lose a
sorry.
pawn, and then you get into no. It's really normal to potentially forget, especially when you notice like throughout most of the game that that piece was protecting something, um, and then all of a sudden it stops defending it. But you know what? That just comes down with the a really good aspect when it comes to us is pretending like you are a scanner, like a printer.
Hmm.
Like like you scan the board each every single move that you make. Like you, of course, even by scanning from one side to the other, you still might not see things, but
Well,
at least if you do that scan, it will benefit your
so the
chess.
problem is, I actually saw that earlier. I saw that it
Hmm.
would take the pawn. I mean, one
Oh,
of the moves I considered was knight takes E2. Um, the issue is, like, it didn't even register to me that we were losing a pawn.
oh, okay.
I knew that it was being taken, but I wasn't paying attention to it. I was looking for the next threat, uh, like a fork or something, and I just didn't even like. I didn't even give that pawn any any consideration, except acknowledging that it was going to be gone. So yeah.
Just to just to also mention that it kind of ruins our I don't know, maybe not capturing on because it's like a good knight for a bad bishop. Yeah, just probably moving the knight back. And then now we're equal, but now I would say we have like maybe the pawn on e4 is weaker than the pawn on d7 because it's easily accessible to us. However, we've ruined our pawn structure as well. But of course,
Yeah.
you wouldn't do this if you had, like more time to if you were playing in a classical game, right, and you had
Right.
90 minutes on the clock, you'd definitely see that.
Well, this isn't the first time. I mean, this isn't the first time that I've like just failed to regard a pawn loss as important. So I think that's just an issue that I have to work on. Um, because I know rationally that they're important, but I'm always looking for the next move.
Yeah. Okay. Knight to okay, so knight to d5. It's not honestly, it's really not a big deal. Like, as long as you see that there is this threat, all you have to do is you just move your rook. It's really, really not a big. It's really, really not a big
Oh no,
threat.
no, yeah,
It would have
for
been a
sure.
bigger threat, by the way, if maybe there was a dark squared bishop. In terms of like, I've lost my rook. I've lost my rook before. When the knight comes here and then the bishop captures on a7. I've lost a rook
Hmm.
like that before. It sucks, but these are the type of mistakes that make you a better chess player. Um, yeah, I mean, honestly, if you're the type of person that has doesn't have a thick skin, I think chess is not for you because the only way to get better is you have to understand the amount of games that you are going to lose. Of course, there's going to be kind of like a balance that when you're getting better, there's going to be a balance in terms of yeah, there might be like a 10% increase. Like it might be like 60% win rate and 40% loss, but you're still going to be
Hmm.
losing a lot of games. you have to not be a sore loser, basically,
Sure.
if you want to excel in this sport. Um, but I think that's like with a lot of things too, right? You
Hmm.
you have to understand that if you lose, that just might mean that you have some. Uh, you need to maybe look into what your weaknesses are and what your strengths are. So like maybe stop focusing on your strengths and start focusing on your weaknesses more. So like if your tactic skills aren't so good, but your opening repertoire is really good, maybe you should focus on your tactics rather than opening, right? And
Yep.
etc. Yeah. So, but yeah, if queen goes to f3, uh, interesting. There's
And
castle. There's
castle.
knight e5. Interesting move. Getting the knight involved.
Ooh.
I
Yeah, I
like.
like that. I like 95.
I like knight e5 too, and especially the knight's on an outpost square actually, which is quite nice. And it defends f7. I guess the only kind of annoyance is what if knight e5 and they try to get into here? I guess you just maybe just not care. Interesting enough,
Yeah.
I wonder if the king might actually be quite safe. There's only one thing that I guess is kind of annoying is why not queen h6? Uh, just so that it. Oh, interesting. Really? Bishop e6. Okay, bishop e6 kind of makes sense. Oh, okay. So Wayne, I see my
Yeah.
tactical skills. This is why anyone who please practice tactics every single day if you want to make sure to be on top of things and see things really quickly.
Hmm.
Is that I was worried about this move. I was
Right.
worried this whole entire time about this move, but what a white is not allowed is shouldn't do this move, or else something really bad happens. And I didn't see
That
it
would
until
be would it be knight d3?
yeah, exactly. Yep. So I was like getting really worried about queen to g7. And by the way, it's not, I guess it's not a huge worry, but if you played queen to g7, you'd have to play like rook to f8. I guess, or like you would move here or something, and well, assuming that the knight or like the scenario is different and queen g7 was possible, you'd have to play rook f8. You'd lose the pawn on h7. Might not be such a big deal. However, if you're the type of person that starts panicking when you can't castle, then you know that might
Uh,
not be amazing for you. But it's not possible to play queen g7 right.
nope. I am not the kind of person that panics when you can't castle.
That's good.
Although I do find it annoying.
That's good. I mean, in this position, as you can see, it's actually even better for us because knowing like we can play knight to g4, and now we're actually creating some sort of threats here. But I don't know. Um, for me, it's just from my experience of playing this opening. I just know
Hmm.
how the discomfort that can come with not having the bishop on g7, which is why I tell all of my students to just be very, very careful. But I mean, I wouldn't be too worried in this position. So queen b3, bishop pawn f3. I mean, like in my opinion, there's really only one variation, or maybe I guess what about a3? Okay, maybe there's a3. A3 is with the idea of you do knight takes e4, maybe b4 or something. Actually, that doesn't work because you would capture on c3 and you would attack the
Yeah.
queen. Never mind, that would not work. A3 would not work here. Um, I'm just trying to think of other ideas instead of going to the absolute main line because then we will be going to a different variation after that. So yeah, I think just
Uh,
castle.
oh, yeah. Yeah.
Is there any other moves that you think that we should?
Oh, we already covered like f3, right?
Yeah, we
Um,
covered f3. We covered queen to
yeah.
d2. We've covered bishop b3, even though bishop b3 doesn't even affect.
Seem to do anything. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Just
those are
castle.
the
See what
moves.
happens.
Yeah. Castle. Yeah. So in when it comes to castling here, I mean, I generally now we just have to go into just like either I castle or I'll play like d6. Those are just like the two options. Let's just castle because d6. To be honest, like we're not in a rush to play d6. Why? Because we're forced to play d6 anyways. We can't play d5. Look at how many defenders there are. There's way too many defenders on d5, unless maybe the knight
Yeah.
moves or something, but that would not be realistic. And also, by the way, playing. So you know how earlier when we were playing yesterday,
Hmm.
we were able to play a variation where we would go into the stone wall. This is
Hmm.
definitely not the type of variation I would consider to play e6 in this case. And why do you think in this case, do you see what hole we've made by playing
Yeah,
e6 in this?
there's still a black square bishop, and the knight actually you weaken the knight um,
Mhm.
if you do that, and you can also get white can also get a knight onto like I guess f4. Um,
What about this
and
square? What about when the pawn goes to e6, it stopped protecting a square that becomes insanely weak.
you mean d4, or sorry, not 4, d5.
Not d5,
Oh god, d6. Why
d6.
do I keep
Yep.
doing that? I don't know why I keep doing that.
So
Yeah,
it's
d6
d.
no, that's where I was thinking that the knight could go. Sorry, I
Oh,
don't know
okay,
what I
okay,
said
because you
earlier.
you said f4. I was like, okay, okay. Yeah, d6. Because if now if white gets, I'm not saying that we're like losing or anything, but like now we are in a rough spot.
Hmm.
So the times, basically, the times that I would encourage that it's okay to play e6 is when you know for a fact that within the next few moves you will guarantee to play d5, which is like in the in those Italian variations. I'll just add it so to re-show. Like yesterday we were playing a game and
Hmm.
the person decided, do you remember, decided to play this move? Like,
Yep.
ugh, when someone plays the Italian game, it's just like this always happens. Always. I okay, not always, but very common. And then I play pawn to e6. As you can see here,
Yep.
this is very early on in the game, which means that why is there a difference? Because as you can see, d5 can actually even be played on next turn. I tend not to
Yep.
play d5 right on the next turn, simply because we're kind of far away from castling and opening up the e file right away. You know, as you can see, by playing e6, we're also creating a tempo.
Yep.
We're creating a tempo on that knight. And as I've mentioned, Wayne, that a lot of people forget about that knight and they castle.
Why would they? Sorry.
I know, why would they
Yes.
castle? You're right. Why would they castle? But it's just something that they probably completely forgot that I'm not only defending against it, but I'm also attacking the knight. Um, So I've had people, but of course, even if they don't lose material, as you can see here, what also makes things different, in my opinion, is that now you can also decide to
Oh.
develop your knight differently with like knight to e7, which kind of like blocks
This
off
is
the e file if you're like worried about it. It keeps the bishop open. And this is really good for
this
black.
is in this situation. Would you be tempted to trade off the black squared bishop to get that pawn? Like you're up a pawn.
What do you mean? Oh, you
So I
mean
mean, it depends
you
on
mean
what white
bishop?
does.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, bishop
Pro-
takes on b2, and then
Problem is that
either
the
the
rook is
bishop
in.
takes.
problem is that
Ah,
the
that's
rook is
right.
in danger. However, that would have been an interesting. It would have been interesting if the king maybe would have been castled. However, I don't know. To be honest, I already hate it when people play against me with like, you know, what I play as white, like with a Nimzo Larsen.
Okay,
Um, but yeah, I mean, in this case, it's just like there's a counter attack, so you kind of can't do it.
can't do it. Yep.
But yeah, but knight e7 and knight to and then pawn to d5. So of course I could have played pawn to d5 earlier on, but it just doesn't feel like a rush at this point. Especially since on the next turn I'm going to be, or on in one of the next turns, I'm going to be playing the knight to 7 and then yeah, dominating the center at that point.
Hmm.
So D3. Yeah, sorry. Going back to what we were looking at before. Okay, so castle. I mean, the best moves are like bishop to b3. The problem. Okay, so see in this position, the problem is that after we play queen to a5, we're basically just playing the dragon at this point. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
There's really there's really no there is really no like opening traps um anymore, at least from what I remember. I don't remember there being any more except what I've stated with all of the other moves. But castling has always been the best move in this position.
Mm-hmm.
And usually I just continue. How do I continue? I'll play like pawn to d6, and I will be thinking about playing a6 and b5. And if your opponent plays like pawn to a4, well, there are times, like when I play. Uh, there's one thing that's very, very important though. I've
Mm-hmm.
lost my queen in a scenario like this, and I'll tell you how, but basically, I lost my queen because I played b6 instead of like trying to play b5, and I like blocked off that diagonal. And I
Oh,
understand that in this case, like you can play queen h5, but I don't remember the scenario. But I think maybe the pawn was here, something was blocking off, and I was kind of the idea was to play pawn to b6 was actually to develop the bishop here. But if your idea is to develop the bishop to b7, then my recommendation would be is to try to get b5 played, so your queen still has that diagonal open,
mm-hmm.
and if I mean, or just move your queen back. It kind of sucks. And you know what? Maybe that is one of the reasons why I started playing castling. The reason why I'm saying that I can't remember is because actually, when I play online, even when I stream, people don't play main line against me. Like it's even on stream. It's I don't see too many people playing super intense main lines or anything like that. So I always feel like quite confident in my black game. Um, but maybe that's just because of the fact that it's online players versus over the board players, right? Over the board players are dedicating themselves um, intensely in the game. I'm not saying that they're. I'm saying that they've taken their passion for chess to the next level, right? Is to be good over the board and be really good in classical games, which not many people, by the way, are interested to do, right? Because a lot of people don't have time to spend a whole weekend playing 5 chess games, right?
That is a
Some
lot of time to dedicate to 5 chess games.
exactly. But it is. I promise you. You'd think that 5 chess games in like 2 days or 2.5 days, but the time actually goes by really, really quickly. Um, you'd be
I believe that.
surprised. I mean, even as you can see, when we have our lessons, we yesterday what we did almost 3.5 hours. Like, okay, but I think we already said that have a different sense of time for you.
Yeah.
For you, it actually felt like 3.5. I don't know. For me, time just goes by pretty quickly. Maybe that's because when you're the one teaching it, maybe that's why it goes by fast.
No,
I
I'm
don't
just strange. What it comes
know.
down to.
Well, it's better to be strange than to be normal, because
Yeah,
then you're then you're
maybe.
um well, then you're just like not then you're just like everybody else, right? So it's better to be your own person. Well, everyone's their own person in certain ways, I guess. But yeah, so castle, yeah, so pawn d6, a6. I mean, this is definitely a potential line that I think I also didn't really prefer,
Mhm.
because like after bishop to b3, we can't play d5, and and a lot of the time, by the way, you might not even succeed with b5. And why you might not succeed with b5 is because after a4, your opponent might just have a lot of defenders. But actually, if the bishop is on b3 and has left this diagonal, it might be easier. But I don't know. I've had some troubles with playing b5 when a4 gets played if there's a bishop on this diagonal. Anyways, my point
Mhm.
is that uh, in the dragon, if you are not able to play pawn to d5, but luckily you were able to trade off on the c file, your position is going to be slightly passive, but it's not going to be as passive like in some of the other dragon variations. Um, and the only reason why I'm saying that it's passive is only if your opponent plays absolutely accurately. Um,
So why can't you play d6 in this
oh,
scenario?
d6 you can. Sorry, I meant
Oh,
d5 you
okay.
can't. You can't play d5.
Oh, maybe you might have said
Or
d5 and I just heard d6. I don't
oh,
know.
and if I accidentally said, I may have accidentally said, and maybe in my brain, sometimes when um when you're like looking at the board and you're looking at a specific piece, but you're thinking about a different piece, but then you say the wrong piece. But
Mhm.
yeah,
Oh no, like
anyways,
that never happens to me ever. Like
but
it didn't
but
even
it
happen
happens to
like
me.
10 or 15 times today for me. So no,
Yeah,
it happens a lot.
it happens. It happens to the best of us, for sure. But it's always just because of like the fact that you are thinking exactly about it. But I guess just something blocks your um, thought process for a second. Yeah. So in this position, and of course, now that d6 gets played, you can play knight to g4, and
Mhm.
actually that would be really, really, it would be quite nice if you kind of get the opportunity to do so. Like for example, yeah, best move is to play h3. Let's say
Sure.
that I don't know. I don't know. Like f4. Actually, f4. I could see someone playing f4, and f4 would be bad.
Oh,
Or
why would they do that?
I've seen
Yeah.
people play f4 because f4 it's to try kind of to try to start attacking, but you kind of want to play h3 and then f4. But believe me,
Yeah.
a lot of chess players they have to learn the hard way. Believe me, the people who play h3 early are the people who fell for it a decent amount
For
of
F.
times because they had to
Yeah.
learn the hard way that don't allow the bishop to go to g4, don't allow the knight to go to g4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
G4 is a really nice square for black.
Yep, yep, especially for the knight. And of course, if this knight is still on f3, like in some variations,
Oof.
the knight could still be on f3. If you remember, we talk about that. We try to trade off this bishop because this bishop, yeah, of course, there are times when this bishop can be uh, extremely good, but that also depends on how your opponent gives you that opportunity.
Sure.
If your opponent doesn't give that opportunity, that bishop on c8 is actually not a very good piece, and I would rather just trade it off and then have my two rooks traded off. Now there's a little bit more space, um, for like some of my other pieces. Because if you can't develop your bishop to g4 and trade, um, your bishop is kind of like stuck on d7. And I don't know, it just seems a little bit squished. Um, just a little bit squished. Yep. So knight, yeah. So
Yeah.
knight g4 is interesting, for sure. Knight d5. Oh, that's interesting. So knight d5. I know it looks like that this pawn is hanging, but if you notice, this knight is the only one defending the pawn. So
Yep.
it's actually kind of a little trap in terms of it's kind of like a pawn trade, but actually your pawn on d6 is extremely weak after, and
Mm.
it's going to be under attack. I know your knight's defending it. I know that the knight is defending it. Um, sorry, I didn't mean to do that first. Sorry.
That's all right. uh,
It's not like a terrible. Oh yeah, there's knight takes c6. Sorry, I actually miscalculated. I didn't even realize that the pawn on c6 was. I was actually only focused on
yeah.
the pawn on d6.
No, this looks not great. What about taking with the what about taking with the knight uh on d5?
If you take the knight on d5, I actually don't recommend it, and I'll explain why. It's because you allow your opponent to capture this pawn, and now a little bit passive, because like we don't have like kind of
Mm,
the option of being able to push the pawn to d5. And there's another point. It's because it opens up the e file, and now there's going to be pressure on e7 for like the remainder of the game. And by the way, the
yeah.
only way that you would know this is if you played this opening. I've played it, and I've learned my lesson. Don't capture the knight on d5 unless like it gives like material. Or you need to, because the problem, what ends up happening is just that your pieces end up having to defend. Um, because a lot of the time you can't push the pawn to e6 or push it forward because of en passant. And if like white already has like um a queen and two rooks kind of ganging up on that pawn in the future, that's when I start getting problems. It's not right now in the middle game. It's more so I start getting problems with the pawn on e7 in the end game. Yeah, in the end game when queens are traded off, like when white doubles up the rooks on the e file, and then I have like no, I have a bad rook on e8 that can't move because it's busy defending the pawn. Of course, his two rooks would be attacking the pawn, but his rooks are still mobile, right? Or his or her, whoever I'm playing against.
Mhm.
His rooks would be more mobile. If you remember, if you remember in end games, I know it's not linked to the. I'm just sorry. I'm just setting it up. Position.
All right.
Okay, so I'm creating like a obscure position, but like there's not going to be kings on the board, but I'm just going to you're going to pretend that the two separate boards.
Okay.
I'm just talking about like the end game. So when you have an extra pawn and your pawn is about to promote, right? What? So like
Yeah.
pretend that the board is cut in half. Like we're talking about two separate, completely positions. It's just I wanted to give a
Sure.
notice in the end game. So where is it better to have your rook behind the pawn when your pass pawn is about to promote, or do you think it's better to have your rook in front of your pass pawn that's about to promote? What do you think? What scenario do you think is better usually? Okay, let's not talk about very um, what is it? Exceptional cases. Okay, let's not talk about
Hmm.
exceptional.
Um. Geez. Which way is better? Um. I seem to recall that uh why, why would it be better one way or the other?
Sorry, which one did you say
Um
that you prefer?
I haven't said yet.
Oh, sorry,
I
sorry.
haven't said yet. I know that there are a lot of puzzles where having the knight, or sorry, having the rook in front of the pawn is better. Um, like there are a bunch of ways to make the the one on the right work with other pieces on the board. Um, but uh,
So, in so by the way, in Rook endgames, I'll give you like an exception. So for example, like in a scenario, um, when maybe having the rook in front of the pawn would be beneficial, I'll give you a different example. It's like when it's a bit different. It's when the rook is actually attacking from a different angle. Um, just something like this. This would be okay. For example, why? Oh, sorry, I set it up incorrectly. The black side is on the bottom, so
sure.
just but we're pretending that white is going up. Okay, I
Sure.
forgot to flip the board. But in this
That's right.
position here, like the only time that you would really be beneficial for your rook to be so close to your pawn would be if you have like this tactic. The problem is if you don't have that tactic. If you don't have that tactic, then your rook is just cramped here in this corner or wherever. Like okay, if you have the pawn here instead, then it would be here. But the point is that your rook only has access to like here, but he can't even move. He's protecting those squares, right? You would
Mm-hmm.
want your it's better for your in the end game, like for your rook to be this scenario rather than this, rather than the other. So um, because in this scenario, actually, you can't even move your rook away in most cases because then you would just lose that pawn, right? So
Yeah.
and in this case, yes, I understand that there's no in a lot of end games that might end up being a draw, like potentially depending on the scenario. However, the thing is that at least your rook has so much mobility because it can come and start like it can still protect many different files, right? uh, uh
Sure.
sorry ranks, I mean, while it's guarding this. So this is just talking about like active and inactive pieces, and I know that it's somewhat not I know that this endgame is not necessarily connected to what I was talking about. However, this is connected in terms of that I'm going to be having to defend this pawn a lot of the time with this rook. This rook ends up being
Mm.
quite inactive because it's forced to stay on e8. A lot of the time, like if you end up having this weakness here, you're forced to have your king defending. This is just from my experience of playing the dragon and what ends up happening with that seventh threat. So you end up having the king defending the pawn on e7, then you end up having the rook defending that pawn on e7. And then
Mm.
your opponent has like doubles up the rooks, but his rooks are still mobile, right? So they can still be doing things and protecting ranks. However, my king and my rook can't do that. I mean, my rook can guard off just the back rank. However, it's not really guarding off anything else. So, yeah. Okay, so he takes d5. So I would not, I wouldn't do that in this position here. I'd probably, I don't know, maybe no. If you play, you can't play bishop e6. Rook e8. I be careful about rook e8. I do like rook e8 actually. Just be careful about the bishop being on the same diagonal. Just, just be careful. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just be careful. But now after you play rook e8, now this pawn is hanging. So either capturing on f6 or queen d3 has to be played. But anyways, the game basically, it does keep going on. As I mentioned, really in my opinion, the only plans here is try to get your knight to g4 and then try to play like a6 and b5, which is just the general idea in the dragon, is to attack on the queen side or in the center. Of course, keep the center as an option, but I personally don't see how you can really control the center just at the moment, simply because of the tension here. Okay, let's go on to a different variation. Okay. Or we can do just castle. I mean, castle is going to be the same thing except without a5. But let's play out the position anyways, and then I'll add in that bishop c4, and we do castle.
Okay.
Starting position. Okay, e4. Sorry, you're.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no worries. Just for practice.
No. I'm with you. It's just
Well, I know you might have a cat somewhere nearby that
yeah, I do.
likes to
That was distracting me a little bit.
likes to say stop, pet me during your or food, or asks for. The castle. This is just like the alternative line. Actually, you know what? Maybe Queen A5 is more interesting to play. Um, you just have to understand that there might be a scenario where you're going to have to play Queen to D8. You're going to have to move your back. However, it might be worth it. You know, maybe your opponent will make a mistake in not castling and play one of those like variations. But I mean, in this type of, as I said, like after castling. Oh, actually, you know what? Let me say, if you have your queen on d8, there might be a really interesting. Wait, does this work? If they castle, I think knight takes e4. Have you ever seen this in an opening?
I have not.
When you sacrifice, but then you get it back.
Oh, I mean, I've seen that. I haven't seen this specific sacrifice.
Specific, yeah. Where you sacrifice your knight for a pawn, but then there's a knight and a bishop fork. So it just opens up the position here.
You mean like with d5?
With d5 after, yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
knight takes e4. If knight takes e4, then pawn to
d5.
d5. Yeah. And even if they capture here, keep in mind that we recapture, and now we do have enough defenders on the pawn.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's still a fork.
And it's still a fork. So there is an interesting, I guess, there's bishop takes f7 can also be played, but I've never had any problems with actually. Yeah, that's so interesting. I totally forgot about this. No wonder. Maybe that's why I was castle. Well, it's interesting. So actually, it seems like with this variation, basically it's like preference. So if you want, you can go with Queen A5 and like go for and hope to see if he goes into one of the bad variations, or you can castle and you can hope that they castle. Because technically speaking, there is a better move here, and the better move here is to play Bishop B3. And that stops you.
Okay.
That stops everything. That
It does.
That stops the because in that position, man, that's so nice because we're not so crammed. We have space. and
Hmm.
we are going to have a decent amount of space. Um,
Plus, I feel like you're close to picking up another pawn too.
yeah, the b2 pawn
Actually,
is definitely hanging, especially now that there's no pawn on b7. Sometimes
yeah.
when you capture, I know that the bishop is still here, but sometimes when you capture on b2, it's like, oh, you lose that pawn. Obviously, not in this case, but yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, I'm actually really happy that we're going over this again. It's starting to make me, especially remind a lot of variations that um but as I said, like if I was continuing playing always mainline variations, even
Hmm.
online, I'd probably not forget something. But yeah, anyway, so as you can see, if castle here, we have this really interesting trade that it gives us some space. D5, knight D3. So we are left with an isolated pawn, but please do not like two isolated pawns. But actually, it's not as bad as you think because a lot of the time, a lot of the time we have so much tension on this pawn, and you have ideas of even like breaking through. Like for example, okay, let's say capture here. Of course, in the beginning, we're gonna play queen to c7. He's gonna play pawn to c3, right? Then we can play rook
Sure.
to b8 here. We're attacking the pawn. And then in the future, what we
Hmm.
can do is we can play a5, a4. I know we can't play a4. Um, I'm glad, by the way, Wayne, that you're you're the type of student that because I like talking about ideas and they don't always can be achievable right away. I do have some students that would say like here, and I don't blame them. I just mean I'm glad that you understand my teaching style. Is that
Oh, it's no problem. Yeah, I got
I
you.
don't actually mean right away to play a4. I know that that is giving up a pawn, but that is just like a crucial kind of like way later on in the game when we are given the opportunity. Maybe we can try to break this pawn structure. I've actually managed to achieve that, especially when my opponent has been, like focusing more on the king side instead. So then I have the opportunity of playing a5, a4, and then a3. Kind of like the idea is kind of like that you're winning this pawn instead. You're creating double pawns, but you're trying to capture
Hmm.
the pawn on c3. But yeah, there's still a lot of it is like in this position. I know that we have the pawn weaknesses, but to be honest, like next move, uh, we can play like pawn to c5. We could even potentially consider, playing bishop a6, putting that bishop on that nice diagonal. And that
Yeah.
bishop can actually support this pawn maybe in the future if it really has to move forward. But um, but yeah, uh, so you do have to just be careful in the future. There is this queen a4 move that would be attacking these two, but let's see. Well, at the moment he defend um, has to defend this pawn. So maybe we can just play pawn c5. Oh, sorry. Actually, what am I saying? If the queen goes to a4, we can play pawn c5 and both. Actually, I don't know why I didn't consider that. Yeah. Yeah. So the idea
It's
is
actually
that
really nice. Yeah.
we have pawn structure weaknesses. However, okay, and the two white bishops look intimidating. However, I mean, next move, I might be taking over the file. I might be thinking about playing bishop e6, attacking this pawn. I might be thinking about bishop a6. So we have some little compensation for the bad pawn structure. It's that our pieces are active and we just have kind of like a lot of little pressure points that we can take advantage of. Um,
Yeah, in this position, it looks like the computers thinks it's basically equal, like a draw. So it's anybody's game, um,
exactly.
which is better than which is better than starting out. So you've already made progress with this position.
Exactly, because isn't it like when isn't it when starting out isn't it when starting out it's like plus 0.3 or 0.4?
Yep. I mean, white is given an initial advantage. Yeah.
Yeah,
or white is acknowledged to have an advantage at the beginning of the game.
right in the beginning. Yeah. And I think it's just because if you think about it, if you make the move first, then you're kind of the aggressor, right? Because you don't hear too many stories about doing the 4 move checkmate as black. It
Yeah.
happens. I get it. It happens, but it's quite rare, actually. For I mean, and a lot of the time it doesn't happen on move 4. It happens like on move 6 if it's like for black. Like move 5 or move 6, maybe even later. Same thing with like the fried liver attack. The fried liver attack, it's just like white. Um, I haven't even heard of a reversed fried liver attack. I don't even think that there is even a line. So it's just because when you have the first move, you can be the first aggressor. So, um, so actually, like Wayne, if you end up liking the dragon, it shouldn't be too much harder to play the English as white, except you have now an extra move. So if you once you get kind of familiar with playing it as black, you can try it even as white. Um, and I don't know, actually, I maybe I should try it as white because I don't know why I never got into the English. Yeah, maybe I should try it. I even encourage a lot of my students to play openings that are um, reversed because it means that you're kind of what is it? What's the saying? Like killing two birds with one stone.
That is a saying, and that does make sense in this context.
Yeah. Yeah. So you learn one opening, but because you can play it as both colors, like by the way, King's Indian Defense and King's Indian Attack, I do think that there are some decent amount of differences in the King's Indian Attack because you are you are playing as the aggressor, but
Mhm.
I wouldn't know. I just have heard from some people. But yeah, okay. So let's go into some other good stuff. Okay, we're gonna start from the starting position again, and we're gonna do a different. We're gonna do the main line, but we're gonna do when F3 gets played because when F3 gets played, there's a reason behind it.
Okay.
There's some more variations. F3. And we're gonna castle because it's after F3 we decide I'll decide which variation we'll do first. Okay. So we're gonna play it out until we get
Sure.
to the moment. Okay, E4, I am playing white. I almost forgot. White. Just because I like playing dragon. Okay, so pawn to f3, and in this position, castle. Like this is where it should just be. This is where things become different because
Hmm.
they're two different kind of common variations, and they are really good for black. Actually, is bishop c4 and queen to d2. Basically, you might be wondering, well, then why would white play something like this? Then I'm not too sure. Period. You should be playing the
Okay.
Maratsi bind. You should be playing maybe the bishop c4 variation without f3. Um,
Yep.
Maybe look into a different opening variation if you're playing as white and you go into these variations. Nothing against it, and it may have worked for a certain point, but if your opponent knows as black what to play against these two moves, then you're not going to do too well. I think maybe with queen d2 there is one scary line, maybe for black, but other than that, a lot of it is not very good. Let's start off with bishop to c4 because I think bishop c4 actually has very similar elements to the queen a5 variation that we talked about.
Mhm.
Except with bishop to c4 in this position, instead of playing queen a5, because the point of queen a5 was that we had the opportunity of playing knight takes e4, and we created a threat.
Mhm.
Instead, we're moving the queen to a different spot, and um, where do you think we're moving our queen to instead of a5?
Uh, what about queen b4?
You mean b6, right?
Oh, God, yes. Sorry, I don't
Okay,
know why
okay,
I said
okay.
four.
No, I think you were maybe thinking about maybe a different piece
No,
going to
nope,
b4. Okay.
nope, nope,
Okay,
nope.
so queen b6. Okay, so very good. Queen b6. So queen b6, there's actually a really, really big um um so if by the way, if white plays absolutely accurately, then it could be kind of equal, but remember that that is our idea as black is
Mhm.
if we can achieve equality and even be slightly better, that is great, right? But the
Yeah,
queen goes to b6, and the idea behind this move is that yes, this pawn is unprotected, but it's also this bishop is unprotected. Why is that important? Is because if your opponent decides to make this move, uh-oh, whew,
you take with check.
yes, you take with check, and
Yeah.
now you've also won the knight back. So, um, yeah. So that would, of course, not be a very good move, but of course we can take a look at some of the options. Now, with queen goes to b6, let's take a look at options for white. What can white do? What are some options that you see white can do other than knight takes c6?
Um, what about bishop b3?
Bishop e3, yep.
Um,
And that's the best variation.
okay. And uh can't do that. So what about knight c to b5?
Yep.
Um,
These two,
and I
yep.
and I guess you could do. I don't know. I guess you could do b3. I guess. I don't
Okay,
know.
yeah,
Seems
b3.
kind of. And oh, I guess you could do. I guess you could do bishop c1,
Okay.
maybe.
Bishop c1, it
Oh, it hangs
leaves
at
the
night.
knight.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not gonna count that move because it just hangs a piece right off the bat.
Yeah. It does.
Well, there's think of how about ways to defend the bishop.
I mean, you could do. Uh, oh, queen c1, maybe.
Okay, queen c1.
Although that
Oh, queen
does
c1 leaves
this.
the knight. Same.
Yeah. Yeah. It's saying it still hangs at night.
And actually,
Um,
what's really interesting, by the way, even though there's a pin with queen c1, wanted to say because you might be like some people might think, oh, well, it's pinned. Maybe I can play like queen to d2. But if you think about it, this queen is overloaded. So it's busy protecting the bishop, but it's also busy protecting the pawn. So luckily, there's actually this really nice knight takes c2 that is a threat on the next turn
yeah.
to get out of the pin and obviously win another, like even more material. So okay, so queen b6, here,
You could do.
b3.
You could do. I guess you could do rook b1 as well.
Okay, yeah, rook b1.
But you want to protect the bishop.
How about we find a way, yeah, because the bishop is unprotected.
Mm, mm, mm. Uh, I, Queen D2, but that, I mean,
Yeah, queen d2, but of course, it follows
it
that.
hangs that pawn. Yeah.
Yes. Well, actually, the pawn on b2, that would not be. I believe we don't go for the pawn on b2. You go with knight takes e4 instead, because if you play queen takes b2, he has rook b1. I think your queen actually gets trapped if you go for b2. So queen d2 is like the threat is that this is poisoned, but you don't go
Okay.
for yeah, you don't go for b2, you go for knight takes e4, and that still wins a pawn. It still wins a pawn because it's that same scenario. It's not the same exact scenario with queen a5, but in this position here, you now have three attackers on
Hmm.
this knight versus just two. I can show you. So after queen takes, rook
Yes,
b1, queen
please.
a3.
Uh-huh. Right.
Wait, knight b5. Yeah, knight b5. Oh, queen a6. Yeah, that's that sucks.
Oof. Yes, it does.
Wow.
Um,
Why not queen? Oh, queen a4 might. Yeah, queen a4. Same thing. It just chases and goes here. I remember. I
hmm,
remember. I remember when I was going over this a while back. I remember too being like a trigger. My dad was
okay,
like,
so you got to get.
"Never accept that pawn on b2. You will lose your queen." So knight takes e4 is what ends up happening. But but let's look into if we can see any other. Or are we done with all the variations here?
And you could also do. What about Queen D3?
Okay, yeah, queen d3. Queen d3 is.
Uh,
I remember when I was going through my opening. I'm gonna try to find that game from. Should be on chess.
I mean, Queen D3 does have the added benefit of. I mean that it's. I mean the queen is still massively overloaded though, so I don't know how much real benefit it would be.
No, trying to find that game where he fell into the opening.
You mean with Queen C3?
Um, I think it's either in this variation, like with bishop e3, or it was in the previous variation. Correct.
Okay. I did say Queen D3, right? Okay. Making sure. after this, do you want to try some games?
Yep. Sorry, is there anything else you have in mind?
Oh, uh, I mean, you could move the bishop back to G1. Oh, you can move the bishop back to F2 as well. I guess that protects it.
Yep, bishop f2. And it looks like
Or bishop.
they didn't upload. Maybe it was because I had such a bad tournament. It's kind of interesting. They have almost every other game from Reykjavik open except that last one. But I'm also looking at it from my phone, so I can't seem to. I'm just
There
looking at
also
the
might have been a
date.
there
I
also
mean,
might have been a transcription problem with the
oh yeah.
um moves. So
Oh, that could be. Another thing is that um, because I wasn't doing too well in the tournament, uh, and I was kind of in the second half of the boards. Maybe the second half of the boards didn't have online transmission. I just can't remember, um, and so they weren't able to post it. But if I do find it, it's just on my phone. I can't see the. Um, yeah, we can look into a few. Let's look into a few variations, and then so queen d2, as I mentioned, we are going to simply go into uh, knight takes e4. So
yeah, that makes sense.
knight takes e4. Um, in this position, okay. So in this position, I believe. Oh, right. I remember there being something to having to take a look at. Oh, wait. Okay, no. Okay, sorry. If knight takes here in this position, actually, it doesn't matter how you capture on d4. The reason why, as I said, you have to be very careful. See, when your queen is on b6, you have to be very, very careful with how you capture. In this position, as I mentioned, when you put your piece under this pin,
Mm-hmm.
um, like here, you have to always be aware about these moves. But luckily, we still have knight c2 in this position. So, um, you can play knight takes
Interesting.
d4, or it's just going to be a trade. Just
Right.
luckily, you don't lose material. Um, yeah, luckily you are not going to lose material. Bishop b3. I'm just thinking, uh, eventually have to. Okay. Sorry, I'm just thinking. To be honest, in this
Mm-hmm.
position, I would not capture the knight. I would just capture with the bishop. Like
Bishop, yeah.
honestly, I never get into myself into knight takes four issues. Technically, it's playable, but I would not be comfortable because I was just looking in this position. I was like, ooh, I can't play queen d6 and get out of the pin. We might have to uh, kind of move around the pieces. I just like bishop takes d4 here. I also like bishop takes d4 because after the trade, if your opponent decides to trade again, you're also threatening. I understand that they can castle, but I've been happy playing these positions. I just play knight to c6 and okay, so one thing though with this endgame, because this endgame is actually quite common if your opponent falls for that, but
Mm-hmm.
um however however, you need to be very careful with how you move your pieces. Like as I mentioned, if you move your pawn to e6, hoping to play d5, you've just created a humongous hole on d6, and good luck with developing this bishop. I promise you, this has happened to me. It was the worst. It was the worst possible thing I've ever done. Is allow no. It was the I believe I even lost that game, and the reason why I lost that game was my opponent. Um, didn't allow my bishop out. So for the whole entire game, my bishop was stuck on c8, and what he did was
Ugh.
he doubled up on the line, and then the knight captured on c8. He won his pawn back on d7, and then his he had full he or she had full control over the d file,
Mhm.
and the rook on the seventh rank already, and I was passive for the remainder of the game. So yeah,
So I kind of feel like this.
please don't play e6.
Okay, all right. But d6 looks all right, and
Yeah,
or
d6
maybe
d6
or
d6 looks all right.
or maybe
D6 is
a6.
good, exactly. D6 A6 is great. I
Yeah.
even like moving the knight here and then pushing pawn to D6. I also like pawn to D6 and getting the bishop out first quickly. Just keep in mind that when you play D6, you're gonna have either a weak E6 pawn or a weak D6 pawn, because if you push your E pawn, you're gonna have a weak D6 pawn. So
Right.
um, I'm not saying. All I'm just saying is, in this position, just be cautious, because your opponent technically has a little bit of compensation for the lack of a pawn, which is that um, is better developed, more developed, uh, and
Mm,
also look out for moves like your opponent might gang up on this pawn and they might try to remove the defender. It's just I've had this happen, so just keep an eye out. But this is game at this point. Just play d6 or a6 or knight e5. Just don't play e6 in this scenario. Um,
okay.
yeah, please don't. I even think king g7 and f5 is already like a better plan
Oh, that's not bad. Yeah.
than e6. Uh, yeah. So
I get it. No e6. I get it. I'm
uh,
with you.
yeah, only play e6 when they play the Italian game, the e4, bishop c4, knight f3, knight c3. Just whatever everyone learns when they first learn chess. Um, okay.
All right.
Okay. So queen to d2. Okay. So what would be more understanding? Okay, rook b1.
Sure.
Okay. Some variations.
I mean, do we just want to go like
Well, there's knight takes e4
queen
again, but
b4 maybe? So
and
I
queen
was thinking
b4.
queen b4.
Yeah, queen
Yeah.
b4, and then I think before and then knight takes e4, but
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe.
I'm just thinking, why not knight takes e4?
Well, you don't have the threat of taking the queen with the knight at the moment, but maybe that doesn't matter.
So knight takes e4. I mean, if he captures, we just go into the same.
True.
Just go into the
What
same
if he doesn't?
stuff.
What if he?
Okay, knight to
No,
d3.
no, you're right.
The only well, if pawn captures, yeah, bishop takes e4. Don't get yourself under the pin. Knight takes e4. Yep. Also bishop e4. Please actually,
Yeah,
c3 still doesn't work, but you put yourself under the pin and I
sure.
can't move, as we talked about. There's knight d5. Okay, so knight d5. But what about queen a5 check? Excuse me. 5 check. So, of course, if here what you do is you just
bishop, yeah,
quickly, wait, the bishop
and then you
lost.
trade off.
You just quickly
That's
trade
interesting.
off.
All right,
So c3, I think, is the
makes sense. If they do c3,
knight
yeah, and you're up to you're just up a pawn.
knight f6. The knight's going to be my knight takes. It's hanging because after knight takes, also knight takes 7 and gets open.
Yeah.
So knight f6. Knight f6. So you might be wondering, well, why can't they capture this pawn? They can, however, they can actually get into some big troubles on this line. D take, yeah, D take. I would probably capture this way because then the bishop can be added into. I know that I always talk about capturing this way, but my gut
Mhm.
feeling was to capture like this because we have very quick access of like playing bishop f5. Well, not right away because the knight's there. If
Right.
if there's not going to be a trade, but you also just want to have both of your rooks on E and D file. As you can see, this is a pretty rare case where we have so much space in the center of the board that we can take advantage of, which is quite nice. Quite nice to have all
Hmm.
this space.
Feels kind of drawish though in
Yeah,
that position.
that's fine though, because we do we are fine with achieving.
A
Um,
draw, yeah, as black, yeah, that
yeah,
makes sense.
no, but we still have like the game is still not over. So,
No, no,
so
it's not. It just looks kind of drawish.
so in this position, I was curious, um, because is that, by the way, why is it good to also at times look at the um computer when you're looking at openings? Because
Mhm.
um Queen c5 has only been Queen c5 has only how is that possible? Queen c5 has only been played 5 times, but knight takes e4 has been played significantly more times.
Ooh, Queen C5. The
Is
computer
really
really likes.
yeah, I know exactly. That's what I'm
Wow.
saying. Queen c5 it really likes in this position. Queen to c5.
Wowzers.
And it's funny for me because I've mostly been affiliated in this opening with Queen b4. And Queen b4 is the next best thing, for sure. Um, yeah, Queen b4 is the next best thing.
Oh, not according to my computer. My computer is saying that
It doesn't
Queen
like Queen.
C5 is it doesn't have it on the list, like on the
Oh,
top five after like 28 moves. Like Queen C5. Oh, there it is. There it showed up. But Queen B4 is drawish. Queen C5 is uh like negative 0.8, which is
wow.
almost a full pawn.
Yeah, I think
Actually,
it's
I'd say
probably
that's a full
because
pawn up from an opening.
I mean
So,
it's probably because we will get a pawn because there's probably something with knight. Oh, this is really interesting. Maybe I forgot about this. I remember there being some sort of weird variation with knight to g4. Oh my god, this like took me back so many years. Queen to c5. So if bishop b3, but now I'm trying to remember. Maybe it's like with queen.
actually, yeah.
Maybe I'm thinking with queen
No,
b4. Then you play knight to. So I'm
no,
kind
no,
of
no. Like the first, like there are. I'm looking at the computer. There are three bishop moves that it says are the best for white, and all three of them are followed up by knight g4.
knight g4. Yeah. No, I'm starting to remember because I completely forgot about this knight g4 because it's not only in the Marazzi bind that you play this knight g4 move. Yeah, I completely forgot. I think it is with the bishop b3. Yeah, with the bishop b3 variation. Except I think when I was playing it, it was with queen b4. I wonder. 1 second. If I just do the queen b4 variation, knight g4. I don't remember queen c5
No,
as
it's saying like
no.
d5. Yeah,
Okay,
but
that's really
like queen
interesting.
c5 is
I don't
really good.
remember.
Like bishop e3, bishop b3, bishop b5 are all you meet all of those with knight g4. And and if you do bishop f1 or b3, then it's d5. Like that's interesting.
Yeah. So when it comes to pattern recognition, I honestly don't remember ever playing or ever studying Queen C5. I've always remembered Queen B4, but when I saw Knight G4, like I automatically like it reminded me about that variation, and I was like, oh yeah, I definitely remember studying this. You purposely play Knight to G4. You're not winning a pawn, but you actually go into an end game, which is really like a really nice end game because your opponent is going to have now this isolated pawn and a double pawn. So you have a lot of chances of winning um, the yeah. So bishop b3, knight to
And that's
g4.
so interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn the computer off now.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
For queen, I think knight. The queen's alive, especially right now. Actually, can't castle. Quite nice. Quite a nice discovered attack. It allows
Oh, oh,
like knight takes. There's no like winning of queen, but you know a bishop will do. So he
bishops.
can't
Yeah,
castle.
going up the bishop's pretty good. Um,
Um, and just I guess one thing is just have to be somewhat careful about this knight being unprotected. Just in terms of be careful, but it seems like actually you always have queen five as an option. I actually kind of like queen five if white allows it, but it is white's turn. Of course the uh decides knight d5. Probably heard my mind.
um, I don't actually.
Seven. There's nothing under attack right now. It's just that the knight moved here to block off the way because I think queen e5 was actually kind of convenient.
Hmm,
It's like it's tagging onto that pawn, and actually, if white castles, pawn on e4 could be under a pin, which is why I think like knight e5 is a good move. Blocks off that opportunity. So I see like king g7. I like king g7 because that just follows it gets off of this diagonal. This is just something that
mhm.
I generally do. Um, can't play pawn f6 because that just leads into really yeah,
Yep.
don't go down that road. Play king g7 instead. Just because someone's stopping your plan, it doesn't mean that you can't switch around to the moves and achieve that same plan, just a little slightly different. Yeah, so king g7, king g7 here. But as mentioned, like I mean, um, we are on move 14 in the game, and
Mhm.
it's already going into like this is what like like at this point
This is middle game, right?
you
Yeah.
should be playing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now we aren't grandmasters. I wish we were, because if we were grandmasters, then we may have had to learn like 30 moves of theory or something. No, but
30
we're
moves Yeah, that's a lot of moves to learn.
Yeah, I mean, okay, going back, just b3. So yeah, okay. So rook b1. So rook b1, queen c5, and then knight g4. Really nice, nice. Don't worry. I'll go. I'll like look back into the study, and then I will make like separate chapters for each line because I should be. Um, anyways, like they should
Mhm.
be on different chapters anyway. But
Sure.
um but okay, so rook b1 we've done. B3. Ooh, b3 is just like, whew, I don't know. It's I mean, knight takes
It's
e4.
problematic. Yeah, I can see
There's
that.
just a very very common theme you'll notice with queen a5. There's knight takes e4 opportunities. With queen b6, there's takes um knight takes e4 opportunity. So here, knight
But
takes e4.
I do. I kind of like Queen B4 in this as well because that's
Queen
maybe not
b4.
first.
Yeah,
Maybe not first, but
yeah, yeah,
soon.
yeah. Well, if queen b4, queen the prop. Okay, so the problem is that, see, now we don't have that.
No, 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 no. I like
Okay, later.
I like knight E4 first, but yeah,
F takes e4, and then just capture here. And I would recommend to capture with the bishop, because
yeah, sure.
I believe, actually in this case, I think we lose the knight on c3 or something. Because the knight's defending the bishop. There's a difference. You can't play knight takes
Yep.
c2 anymore. Uh, yeah, can't play knight takes c2 anymore. You could play queen c5, but then bishop c3. I don't know. It doesn't look good. Not look good. Just bishop takes
Well,
d4. Um, just
sure.
remember in the other scenario, the reason why we decided to do knight takes d4 instead of bishop takes d4, it was because the queen was on a5, and I think we may have even already traded the queen, so there was no reason. Here there's a reason. You just don't want to put yourself under the pin, so you're taking the chance of giving up or trading off um your nice bishop. uh However, you get a pawn out of it. So maybe if you really like that bishop, you just don't accept the pawn, I guess. Queen, so
I don't know. Going up a pawn's pretty good.
exactly. So we've done queen d2 because we've talked about that you can't capture this. You should just go for knight takes
Right.
e4 instead. Um, b3, rook b3. Okay, bishop b3. So bishop b3, pretty sure knight takes e4 still is a possibility. Five, five. Yeah, you have to go into. You just have to like remember, go like knight f6 and knight d6, like that variation. So they capture here, and it's a pretty good position. Being up a pawn. If they try to win the pawn on e7, as I mentioned, it kind of goes into interesting stuff because white hasn't castled. There's even queen e5. There's rook e8 coming, and then controlling over the e file.
Oof.
There's
Yep.
only I guess one more variation that I just remembered about, which you have not mentioned, which is knight to f5. But knight f5 is not good. It's one of the worst
Oh.
variations. However, it can be played because, however, now in this position, there's a difference. There's a huge difference. Why with queen d2? Queen d2 defends the knight. You can
Hmm.
capture the pawn on b2 safely because at the moment there's a tempo. There's a tempo on the knight, and you have a possibility to either, I believe, escape with the queen, or in this position, I believe if the queen goes to d2, I think I wonder. Wait, he can't go queen d2. He loses the rook. He can't do that. Yeah, so he's in trouble. He has to play something like this. Wait, but if he plays here, then his knight is in trouble. Yeah, as you can see, like this is just really, really bad for white. But I remembered this move being in my opening book, so I had to play it. Had to play it.
Okay.
But yeah, in this position here, I mean, there is, I guess, knight this move, but then you come here with check, and now everything is hanging. Um, and I believe that is it with this variation. Is just remembering all of the knight takes e4, and then remembering in one of the variations we play. So if they play rook b1, we play queen to c5, and then we do the knight g4 variation. Really interesting. Um, okay. Well, we have time for about a game because I do need to call my parents. But okay. Bye to the YouTube stream. Thanks for everyone for watching. We'll continue with the Sicilian uh, lesson. We're getting very close to um, going over a lot of the lines. All of the weird, by the way, all of that weird lines that white can play, I tend not to go through. Why? Because a lot of the time it's not very good. You know, like when white just like allows you to gain control over the center and stuff like that. That's something that's not very common, right, for higher ranked players. But it can be obviously common when we play online.